Poorest 5 crore households of India will get a standard amount of 6,000 rupees a month, 72,000 rupees a year. I think it's just absolute rubbish to say that there was no poverty reduction. Now, as the Congress president called it, this is the final assault on poverty.
We're joined today by Mr. Praveen Chakravarty, who has been instrumental in bringing out NYAY, which Rahul Gandhi, with great aplomb, announced to the nation. I want to ask you, Praveen, first and foremost, what is it that the scheme intends to do?
The motivation for the scheme is a recognition of the fact that headline economic growth does not translate into real incomes and income growth for the bottommost sections of our society. So, which means what should we do as a government, as a policy maker? We must then have a direct support and assistance and a support guarantee scheme for those people that are left behind, and that really is the motivation for the scheme.
How are you going to identify those people?
It's actually not that hard to identify who are the 5 crore poorest families in India.
But India does not have an income survey, so to speak. So what survey are you actually going to rely on?
This perhaps would not have been possible 10 years ago. But today we have a variety of data sets and information that's available today. That includes socioeconomic caste census, IHDS data, some income data sets, some inequality data sets, some consumer pyramid consumption data sets, all of those. Second, we must also recognize that there are advances in data science and data analytics and technologies, which we can now use to triangulate to identify the poorest. Third, please let's remember that already most government programs operate under this assumption of a certain targeting.
There's a lot of confusion, you would say something and some of your party people are saying something else when it comes to whether the scheme is actually a top-up scheme or is it a straight grant? What is it?
I actually don't think there's any confusion at all. It's fairly categorical. I think we've said it in press conferences. The poorest 5 crore households of India will get a standard amount of 6,000 rupees a month, 72,000 rupees a year. Using the data sets that we have, we know that on average, the poorest 20% of households, 5 crore households, earn 6,000 rupees a month today. On average. We've also came to the conclusion that for an Indian family in 21st century India to live a life of dignity and self-respect, minimum income line is at 12,000 rupees. So if the minimum income line should be 12,000 rupees, and if there are people of the average income of the poorest 20% is 6,000, the gap is 6,000 rupees a month. Hence, we came up with the 6,000 rupees number.
Where is all that money coming from? Because Mr. P. Chidambaram said in his press address that it is going to be around 1.8% of the GDP. Now, if we look at the existing subsidy overlays, the sum is going to be, say, somewhere around 7 lakh crore. And Raghuram Rajan said that there is no way that this can be accommodated.
First and foremost, this is a federal scheme. It will be the combined scheme of the center and the states. Okay. Today, India's economy, India's GDP is 200 lakh crores roughly. Do you know that we already today, center and state combined, spend 60 lakh crores? We spend 60 lakh crores today. We're talking about 3.5 lakh crores for the poorest 20%. Fairly sure we can find the money for that.
Or you can tax the janta.
It could be revenues. It could be revenues that we could raise through various sources.
Like what?
in our view, a simple simplification of GST alone will actually lead to increased tax revenues, what economists call tax buoyancy. Second, there could be a revenue opportunity such as monetization of some assets, of government assets. So there could be revenue opportunities as well. And let's not forget, what does this scheme do to the overall economy? It remonetizes India's economy. You put money in the hands of, back in the hands of people. Money in the hands of people means they go out and use that money. It leads to a consumption boost, which leads to an investment demand, which leads to job creation, which leads to higher tax revenue.
Which also leads to a higher degree of privatization. Which means that when you are putting money in people's hand, their purchasing power is increasing. So, you know, your universal basic infrastructure that that a state like India needs to provide to its people would then be left at the hands of private players that now people can afford it. So why not? Healthcare, education.
Not necessarily. I don't think the two are related at all. I don't think this gets the government out of building hospitals or providing education. None of that, in fact. If anything, I'm saying this is the way to restart the economy. There is on one hand, we have the benefit of social justice. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we all acknowledge that the economic engine today has come to a complete stop. This is one way to even restart that economic engine. And if anything, that will only increase government capacity to do many of the other things that it wants to do.
What are the gains, electorally speaking, that you are looking at with this announcement? I have to ask this question.
No, of course, you can ask the question, no problem. Mm-hmm. But, there is no answer to that. I think it's very, the idea was actually first proposed by Arvind Subramanian in 2017 in his economic survey. Last time I checked, there were no big national elections at that time. I think it's extremely unfair to dismiss this as some electoral gain, because the idea was actually first proposed in 2017 by this government's own chief economic advisor.
Skepticism is also coming from you guys, because you are saying that we will roll it out in phases. Why?
I think it is a very, very healthy practice to roll it out in phases, do pilots. Then we all know what happens when you stand up one day and say, on the midnight hour of some day, we will introduce a new economic policy, and I'm referring to the GST or even demonetization. You can't make economic policy changes like that.
That the Prime Minister always keeps saying कि गरीबी उतने सालों में तो हटी नहीं, अब न्याय से क्या न्याय मिलेगा. So what do you have to say to that?
That's actually quite a rubbish argument. Mm-hmm. At the time of independence, India's poverty was 70%. Mm-hmm. Today, it's 20%. What is coming down from 70% to 20% mean? What is that if that's not Garibi Hatao or poverty reduction? It is absolutely poverty reduction. It's acknowledged across the world. 140 million people lifted out of poverty in the period 2004 to 2014. It's in history the highest number of people lifted out of poverty in a decade anywhere in history. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just absolute rubbish to say that there was no poverty reduction. Now, as the Congress president called it, this is the final assault on poverty for that remainder of 20% of poorest Indians.